My arrogant white husband laughed while signing the divorce papers, until the black judge read out my bank balance. He scoffed, a booming laugh echoing through the courtroom as he reached for the pen. He thought he was signing away a ghost, but he was about to sign away his entire world. Welcome, my incredible family. Get ready to witness a story of quiet power, shattering arrogance, and a judge's words that changed everything. The scent of lemon polish and freshly laundered linen clung to Emilia's small apartment, a stark contrast to the sterile gleam she meticulously maintained in the grand houses of her clients. Her fingers, still strong despite years of work, smoothed a wrinkle from a throw pillow, a precise, almost ritualistic motion. This quiet order was her sanctuary, a silent rebellion against the chaos of her marriage. For too long she'd felt like a ghost, a whisper in the echoing halls of the Lane estate, her own small triumphs deemed insignificant. A single tear, quickly blinked away, tracked a path through the faint dusting of cleaning product on her cheek. She was tired of feeling invisible, of having her kindness mistaken for weakness. The silence here, in her own space, was a balm, but a fragile one, constantly threatened by the memory of a booming, dismissive laugh. Meanwhile, across town, in the cavernous, art-filled study of the Lane estate, Julian reclined in a leather chair far too grand for his actual accomplishments. A half-empty glass of amber liquid sat beside him, catching the glint of the setting sun. Emilia. He scoffed to his reflection in the polished mahogany desk, the name tasting like a stale joke on his tongue. Still playing house with her little rags, I suppose. His laugh, deep and resonant, filled the room, a sound of unearned confidence that had, for years, chipped away at Emilia's soul. He imagined her now, small and pathetic, clinging to whatever scraps he allowed her. The divorce papers sat neatly on his desk, already signed on his end, a clean break he anticipated with glee. Tomorrow he would finalize his freedom, and she would simply vanish. He just needed to hand her the papers. He drained his glass, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips, completely oblivious to the quiet strength he so utterly underestimated, a strength that was about to collide with his world. Have you ever felt completely underestimated, only to discover a hidden power within yourself? Share your thoughts below. I love hearing your stories. The courtroom air was thick with the hushed murmur of anticipation, a stark contrast to the thunderous echo of Julian's earlier laughter. He sat across from Emilia, radiating smug confidence in his tailored suit, his lawyer occasionally leaning in to whisper, sharing a victorious chuckle. Emilia, by contrast, felt a familiar tightness in her chest, a knot of quiet dread mixed with a steely resolve. She clutched the worn leather brief Arthur had given her, its smooth, cool texture a small comfort. Her gaze flickered to the judge's bench. Judge Willis, a formidable black woman with an aura of unwavering authority, adjusted her spectacles, her presence commanding immediate silence. Julian winked at his mother, Eleanor, who was seated behind him, a triumphant smirk plastered on her face, mouthing something about bus tickets. Then, the moment arrived. Julian's lawyer, with an almost theatrical flourish, presented their settlement proposal, outlining Emilia's supposed destitution, Julian's immense generosity, and her modest business's negligible worth. Julian leaned back, eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction, waiting for Emilia to crumble. But as the judge took the papers, her gaze, sharp and piercing, flickered from Julian to Emilia, then back to the documents. She scanned a particular line, her brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. A tense silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Julian, anticipating his formal victory, began to sign the final divorce papers. His lawyer slid towards him, a loud, self-congratulatory chuckle escaping his lips, so loud the court clerk shifted uncomfortably. He was still laughing, a booming, dismissive sound that filled the room, when Judge Willis cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the smug mirth like a surgical knife. "Mr. Lane," she stated, her words slow and deliberate, "the court must first address this addendum." She paused, her eyes locking onto Julian's, and then, with chilling precision, she pronounced. Mrs. Emilia Lane's current liquid account balance as of this morning is $2.4 million. Julian's laughter died in his throat, his pen clattering uselessly to the floor. The smile snapped in half on his face, replaced by a ghastly, incredulous stare. The air crackled with a sudden, electrifying silence. The courtroom remained frozen in a collective gasp, the judge's words hanging heavy, echoing in the sudden, disbelieving silence. Julian's face, moments before flushed with arrogance, was now a mask of utter devastation, drained of all color. He opened his mouth, but no sound came, only a strangled, pathetic cough. His lawyer, initially stunned, quickly recovered enough to whisper furiously, "Objection, Your Honor. This is preposterous. Where would she possibly acquire such funds?" His voice was a frantic bluster, attempting to regain control of a narrative that had violently derailed. Emilia, though internally reeling, maintained a serene, almost unreadable expression. The shock was immense, even for her, as the full weight of Arthur's meticulous planning hit her. It was more than she had ever imagined. Eleanor, Julian's mother, let out a small, choked whimpering sound from the gallery, her previous smugness replaced by dawning horror. Her perfectly coiffed head whipped towards Julian, a silent, furious accusation in her eyes. This wasn't the script they'd written, the public humiliation they'd planned for Emilia. This was a catastrophic blow to their carefully constructed world, and Julian, in their eyes, was clearly to blame. Julian, however, was in a state of outright denial. He shook his head, a wild, desperate gesture. "It's a mistake, a trick. She has nothing. My business built everything." His voice rose, tinged with panic, completely refusing to accept this new reality. He still saw her as the charity case, the silent shadow, incapable of such a feat. Judge Willis simply raised an eyebrow, her gaze unwavering, clearly unimpressed by his outburst. The tension in the room thickened, a palpable current of disbelief and burgeoning panic from Julian's side, met by a quiet, formidable certainty from Emilia's. They desperately tried to resist the truth, but the numbers, so calmly spoken by the judge, were irrefutable. The judge's gavel struck, a sharp, decisive crack that sealed Julian's immediate fate. Motion denied. The court will proceed with a full financial audit based on these new revelations. Mr. Lane, you are to remain in court until all exhibits can be formally presented. Julian stared blankly, the gravity of the judge's words barely registering through his shock. Emilia, however, felt a strange lightness, a sense of gravity shifting in her favor. Evelyn, her attorney, gave her a small, reassuring smile, a silent acknowledgement of the battle won, but the war not yet over. The room began to stir, but Julian and Emilia remained rooted, bound together by the sudden, drastic turn of events. As the court recessed for a mandated break, the space transformed from a formal battleground to a tense, unavoidable waiting room. Julian, still pale and trembling, was cornered by his visibly distressed lawyer, who whispered frantic instructions. Eleanor, her face a mask of crumpled fury, hovered nearby, her eyes darting between Julian and Emilia with venomous resentment. Emilia found herself in a quiet corner, Evelyn beside her, shielding her from the hostile glares. But there was no escaping Julian's furious, panicked movements. He paced, muttering to his lawyer, occasionally shooting bewildered, angry glances at Emilia. The shared space, once a symbol of his impending triumph, was now a crucible of his undoing, forcing him to witness Emilia's calm composure as his world crumbled. He couldn't leave, couldn't escape her unexpected, powerful presence. His disbelief still warred with a dawning, terrifying understanding that Emilia, the woman he had so effortlessly dismissed, held the keys to his future, and possibly his freedom. Their paths, once diverging, were now inextricably, albeit temporarily, intertwined. During the tense recess, as Julian huddled with his increasingly frantic lawyer, Emilia finally felt ready to open the second, thicker envelope Arthur had given her. Evelyn, her attorney, sat beside her, her expression unreadable but attentive. Emilia's fingers trembled slightly as she broke the seal, pulling out not legal documents but a series of cryptic handwritten notes, a secure digital key, and a sealed letter addressed strangely to "My dear Evelyn." Her heart pounded with a mix of apprehension and a burgeoning sense of profound protective love. Evelyn took the letter, her eyes scanning its elegant script. Her professional demeanor softened, replaced by a look of deep understanding and a hint of wistful sadness. "Emilia," she began, her voice quiet. "This is from Arthur. He details a trust, an investment, and a meticulous long-term plan he set into motion years ago." She paused, her gaze meeting Emilia's. "Your small cleaning business, Clear Horizons, wasn't just yours. Arthur had been a silent partner, a strategic investor. He transformed it from a local service into a sophisticated property management and rental company. And you, Emilia, are the 70% owner of a highly successful enterprise." Emilia gasped, the breath catching in her throat. The sheer scale of Arthur's foresight, the silent, painstaking work he had done to build her up beneath the Lanes' very noses, was overwhelming. Then came the next revelation. The house, the one Julian is demanding. Arthur had quietly paid it off and transferred it into your name 6 months prior to the divorce filing. Emilia's hands flew to her mouth, tears welling. The house, the sanctuary she'd thought was just part of the marital assets, was truly hers. But the deepest cut, the most profound truth, was still to come. And then there's the trust from his personal estate, bearing your name, explicitly excluding Julian. Evelyn's voice dropped to a near whisper. "He'd been watching Julian, Emilia. He saw how he treated you, how he belittled your aspirations. He saw your integrity, your hard work, and he acted to protect you. He built this fortress around you." Emilia looked at Julian across the room, seeing him not just as an antagonist, but as a blind, arrogant fool. The mystery of Arthur's actions intensified, revealing not just financial support, but a profoundly empathetic and strategic mind working to shield her from the very family she had married into. She scanned a particular line, her brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. A tense silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Julian, anticipating his formal victory, began to sign the final divorce papers. His lawyer slid towards him, a loud, self-congratulatory chuckle escaping his lips so loud the court clerk shifted uncomfortably. He was still laughing, a booming, dismissive sound that filled the room, when Judge Willis cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the smug mirth like a surgical knife. "Mr. Lane," she stated, her words slow and deliberate. "The court must first address this addendum." She paused, her eyes locking onto Julian's, and then with chilling precision she pronounced, "Mrs. Emilia Lane's current liquid account balance as of this morning is $2.4 million ours." Julian's laughter died in his throat, his pen clattering uselessly to the floor. The smile snapped in half on his face, replaced by a ghastly, incredulous stare. The air crackled with a sudden, electrifying silence. The courtroom remained frozen in a collective gasp, the judge's words hanging heavy, echoing in the sudden, disbelieving silence. Julian's face, moments before flushed with arrogance, was now a mask of utter devastation, drained of all color. He opened his mouth, but no sound came, only a strangled, pathetic cough. His lawyer, initially stunned, quickly recovered enough to whisper furiously, "Objection, Your Honor, this is preposterous. Where would she possibly acquire such funds?" His voice was a frantic bluster, attempting to regain control of a narrative that had violently derailed. Emilia, though internally reeling, maintained a serene, almost unreadable expression. The shock was immense, even for her, as the full weight of Arthur's meticulous planning hit her. It was more than she had ever imagined. Eleanor, Julian's mother, let out a small, choked whimpering sound from the gallery, her previous smugness replaced by dawning horror. Her perfectly coiffed head whipped towards Julian, a silent, furious accusation in her eyes. This wasn't the script they'd written, the public humiliation they'd planned for Emilia. This was a catastrophic blow to their carefully constructed world, and Julian, in their eyes, was clearly to blame. Julian, however, was in a state of outright denial. He shook his head, a wild, desperate gesture. "It's a mistake, a trick," She has nothing. My business built everything. His voice rose, tinged with panic, completely refusing to accept this new reality. He still saw her as the charity case, the silent shadow, incapable of such a feat. Judge Willis simply raised an eyebrow, her gaze unwavering, clearly unimpressed by his outburst. The tension in the room thickened, a palpable current of disbelief and burgeoning panic from Julian's side, met by a quiet, formidable certainty from Emilia's. They desperately tried to resist the truth, but the numbers so calmly spoken by the judge were irrefutable. The judge's gavel struck a sharp, decisive crack that sealed Julian's immediate fate. Motion denied. The court will proceed with a full financial audit based on these new revelations. Mr. Lane, you are to remain in court until all exhibits can be formally presented. Julian stared blankly, the gravity of the judge's words barely registering through his shock. Emilia, however, felt a strange lightness, a sense of gravity shifting in her favor. Evelyn, her attorney, gave her a small, reassuring smile, a silent acknowledgement of the battle won, but the war not yet over. The room began to stir, but Julian and Emilia remained rooted, bound together by the sudden, drastic turn of events. The recess eventually ended, and the judge ordered Julian to remain on court premises as the audit commenced. Emilia and Evelyn were allowed to leave, with the understanding that they would be called back as needed. Stepping out of the courthouse, the afternoon sun felt like a warm embrace after the sterile chill of the courtroom. As Emilia navigated the buzzing media presence, a hand gently touched her elbow. It was Arthur. He hadn't spoken much inside, his presence a quiet, formidable force, but now his gaze held a gentle warmth that soothed her raw nerves. "Emilia," he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "Are you all right?" She simply nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "Arthur, I don't know how to thank you. How did you know? Why did you do all of this?" He chuckled softly, a sound like rustling leaves. "My dear, some things are clearer from a distance. Julian, he always had a talent for seeing only what he wanted to see, and a talent for taking shortcuts. I watched him for years, building nothing of substance, always looking for an easy way out, always believing others were beneath him. I saw how he treated you, how Eleanor encouraged it. It became clear you were in an untenable situation." He paused, his gaze softening further. "But it wasn't just that. I saw your business, Emilia. Your real business. You poured your heart into it, every detail, every client. You worked harder than anyone I knew. While Julian mocked, I saw potential. I saw integrity. And I saw something else." His voice trailed off, a hint of sadness in his tone. "A resemblance. You reminded me so much of someone I loved very much, my own daughter. She had that same quiet strength, that same unwavering kindness. She was fiercely independent, just like you." A wave of profound emotion washed over Emilia. Arthur rarely spoke of his family, particularly his late daughter, who had passed away tragically young. "The trust fund," Emilia whispered, a poignant truth dawning on her. "It was hers, wasn't it? And you put my name on it." Arthur nodded, his eyes glistening. "It was always meant for someone worthy, Emilia. Someone who understood the value of honest work, of a kind heart. Julian would have squandered it, as he squandered so much else. You were the obvious choice, the right choice. It was a way for her legacy to live on, through your success." In that moment, surrounded by the courthouse chaos, a fragile but profound bond solidified between them. It wasn't just about money or legal victories. It was about being seen, truly seen, not as a charity case, but as the inheritor of a dream, a spirit, a quiet resilience that mirrored his own daughter's. It felt like healing, a moment of unexpected love and connection blooming in the ashes of her marriage. The initial glow of Arthur's revelation and the courtroom victory slowly faded as the gravity of Julian's family's malice became starkly clear. 2 days after the first hearing, Emilia returned to her modest apartment, a temporary haven. She thought the worst was over, that the truth had set her free to rebuild, but she underestimated the depths of their pride and their refusal to accept defeat. Just as Arthur had subtly warned, they launched their desperate counterattack. Eleanor, Julian's mother, showed up at Emilia's building, flanked by Victoria and an aggressive-looking lawyer, their faces contorted with a fury that curdled the air. They didn't knock. They simply waited, like a predatory tableau, until Emilia emerged, heading for a client meeting. Eleanor, her voice shrill and trembling with barely contained rage, spat. "You think this is finished? My son built that business. You had nothing before us." Victoria then thrust a stack of legal-looking papers towards Emilia. "Either you renegotiate quietly," she hissed, her eyes blazing, "or we take this to federal court and expose every penny you've hidden." The lawyer beside them wore a predatory smirk, clearly enjoying their attempted intimidation. Emilia felt a cold knot of dread in her stomach, a familiar tightening she hadn't anticipated after her victory. The old fear, the feeling of being overwhelmed, threatened to resurface. Was this truly never-ending? Had she merely traded one battle for another, even uglier one? Just as she was about to respond, her phone buzzed with a message from Evelyn. "Do not engage. They're already being investigated. Federal charges pending." A quiet, grim smile touched Emilia's lips. Her calm, however, only fueled Victoria's rage. "You're not intimidating anyone," Victoria sneered, stepping closer, her face inches from Emilia's. "Our family still has influence." It was a harsh, bitter exchange, tearing at the fragile peace Emilia had just begun to build. The bond with Arthur, the solace of his words, seemed momentarily distant, overshadowed by the venom of their relentless, unforgiving hatred. This external attack shattered her sense of peace, forcing her back into a confrontation she desperately wanted to avoid. The image of Eleanor's face, drained of all color as the federal investigator served her papers, was burned into Emilia's mind. The swift, undeniable reality of their downfall had finally hit them, and their retreat from her apartment had been absolute. Julian had vanished, swallowed by the shame of his public disgrace, while Victoria had fled to another state. Eleanor, stripped of her venom and her social standing, was now a hollow echo of her former imperious self, facing the consequences alone. The 2 weeks leading up to Eleanor's hearing for fraud and coercion were a strange, introspective period for Emilia. The initial rush of vindication had settled, replaced by a complex tapestry of emotions. There was profound relief, a sense of justice finally served. But there was also a quiet sadness for the years lost, the emotional toll of living under their oppressive shadow. Arthur's profound kindness, born from his own grief and his daughter's legacy, now felt like a heavy mantle, a quiet responsibility to honor the spirit of his actions. Emilia spent long nights in her now truly her own house, walking through the quiet rooms, reflecting. She questioned herself. Would she succumb to the raw temptation of total destruction, mirroring their cruelty? Or would she rise above the cycle of bitterness and resentment they had so zealously perpetuated? On the day of Eleanor's hearing, the courtroom was starkly empty. Julian was absent, a ghost of his former arrogance. Eleanor sat alone, a spectral figure, her eyes downcast, her posture slumped in defeat. Judge Willis, formidable and unyielding, looked directly at Eleanor. "Mrs. Lane," she stated, her voice steady, "you walked into my courtroom laughing the first time. Let's see if you'll leave laughing today." Then, her gaze shifted to Emilia, a silent, weighty invitation. Evelyn, her attorney, offered a subtle nod of encouragement. Arthur, seated in the front row, his presence a quiet, unwavering anchor, met her eyes with profound support. This was it. The true test. The power was entirely in Emilia's hands, not just legally, but morally. She stood, the air filling her lungs with a surprising clarity. Revenge, while satisfying in the short term, felt hollow, ultimately destructive. She remembered Arthur's daughter, her quiet strength. She thought of her own arduous journey from charity case wife to the woman who stood before them now, This was her moment of profound choice: to perpetuate the cycle, or to truly, definitively break it. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, waiting for her decision. Emilia took a slow, deliberate breath, the courtroom's hushed anticipation pressing in on her. Her gaze, clear and steady, finally rested on Eleanor, who looked up, her eyes wide, vulnerable, completely devoid of her usual malice. It was a face stripped bare, revealing only fear and regret. Emilia thought of all the years, the subtle jabs, the mocking laughter, the profound loneliness. The path of retribution, of seeing Eleanor utterly crushed, was right there, a tempting, bitter fruit. But then she thought of Arthur, of his daughter's legacy, of the quiet strength that had shielded her. This wasn't about matching their cruelty. It was about elevating herself beyond it. "Your Honor," Emilia began, her voice calm, clear, resonating with a newfound authority that surprised even herself. "I'm not here to destroy people." The words hung in the air, a stark, powerful contrast to the destruction Julian and his family had so gleefully attempted in her life. "I'm here to end the cycle." A profound silence descended upon the courtroom. The judge's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something akin to approval in her eyes. She studied Emilia for a long moment, acknowledging the immense strength in that choice, a mercy born not of weakness, but of profound backbone. "Mercy with backbone," Judge Willis finally said, her voice thoughtful, almost reflective. "That's rare. This court appreciates your perspective, Mrs. Lane." She paused, then her gaze swept across the room, settling on Eleanor's trembling figure. "Given the plaintiff's expressed wishes and the clear evidence presented of fraud and financial misconduct, Mrs. Lane, the court will proceed with a civil judgment for restitution of all funds and refer the criminal forgery charges to the DA, but will take Mrs. Lane's willingness to move forward into consideration regarding further punitive actions." Then, with a final resonant bang of her gavel, she declared, "Court adjourned." The sound was no longer a symbol of dread, but a symphony of liberation, a powerful echo of the first gavel, now transformed into her victory. Julian, swallowed by the weight of his own misdeeds, never showed his face in court again, retreating into a self-imposed exile, his arrogance finally catching up to his lack of genuine substance. Victoria, humbled and ashamed, attempted no further contact. And Eleanor? She went silent. The kind of silence that only comes after reality finally collects its bill, when all the bluster and all the lies have been stripped away, leaving only the stark, undeniable truth. There were no more threats, no more smug pronouncements, no more laughter, just the quiet, chilling realization that the charity case wife, the one they mocked, had not only built her own empire, but had also found the strength to forgive, even as she demanded justice. The cycle of their malice had broken not by matching their cruelty, but by choosing a path of profound, quiet strength and unshakable integrity. The unexpected love, the quiet bond with Arthur, had shielded her, empowered her, and ultimately set her free. When faced with the opportunity for revenge, what does it truly mean to end the cycle rather than perpetuate it? Share your deepest thoughts and experiences in the comments below.